Imagine stepping into the voting booth, or maybe mailing in your ballot. It's a fundamental act, right? Underpins our entire democracy.
Absolutely fundamental.
Now, imagine finding yourself sort of tangled up in a complex legal challenge, where your right to vote, that basic right, becomes the subject of, well, intense scrutiny. What happens when the system, the very system designed to protect and count your voice, hits an unexpected glitch? Or maybe something worse, like an intentional misstep.
Yeah, that's the worry, isn't it?
And this isn't just about those, sensational headlines we see all the time. It really goes to the bedrock of how we make our collective voices heard.
It touches on the confidence you, the listener, place in the whole democratic process.
Exactly. So today, we're embarking on a really crucial deep dive. We're looking into the timely, and let's be honest, often vigorously debated topic of election integrity.
It's definitely a hot topic.
And our discussion today is spurred by a specific recent case out of Michigan. It's a tangible incident, something concrete that brings these often abstract conversations right to our doorstep.
Right. It eliminates that intricate dance between, say, individual actions, the legal responses, and then these much broader national policy debates.
So what are we digging into specifically?
We're going to meticulously unpack an article from September 4th, 2025. It details a specific plea agreement in a voter fraud case.
Okay.
But, look, this isn't just about one incident. Our goal is to use this single event almost like a lens,
Right.
A lens to explore this much broader discussion about election security. We'll move from the specifics of these local charges in Michigan to the really sweeping national policy debates that are shaping our whole electoral landscape.
So the local impacts the national picture.
Precisely. Our mission here is to guide you through the specific facts of this Michigan case first. Then we'll examine other reported instances of voting irregularities that our sources highlight.
Okay, other examples too.
Yeah, and then explore the deeply divergent perspectives on how our elections should be managed. There are strong opinions on all sides. We really aim to help you understand these critical nuances, to give you a comprehensive view without feeling, totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information and all the differing viewpoints out there.
Absolutely. And we'll start by dissecting exactly what unfolded in Michigan, understanding the specific charges, the legal outcomes, what actually happened.
Get the facts straight first.
Then we'll hear what officials are saying, both in response to this particular case and about election integrity more generally.
Context is key.
From there, we'll zoom out. We'll connect these local events to the larger national conversation. Things like ballot security, the role of mail-in voting, the technology of voting machines.
All the big pieces.
And what all of this ultimately means for the confidence you place in our democratic process. We know these topics can be complex, often politically charged.
Very much so.
So our commitment is to provide an impartial, fact-based exploration. We want to guide you through the varied views to give you a clear, balanced understanding of the landscape.
No agenda, just the information.
Right. Okay, let's dive in. Let's start with this central piece of our deep dive today. The case of Frank Prezzato.
Okay.
He's a 68-year-old resident of St. Clair Shores, Michigan. And he's recently pled guilty to a significant charge directly related to the August primary election.
So, a primary election case. What was the charge exactly?
The specifics are quite stark. Prezzato admitted in court to casting 2 votes in the very same election.
2 votes? How?
1 absentee and 1 in person. Apparently, he had already completed and returned an absentee ballot.
Standard procedure for many people.
Right. But then, on election day itself, she actually went to his local polling location, requested another ballot, and proceeded to cast it right there.
Wow. And what's particularly striking reading the source material is the detail that both of these votes, both were reportedly counted in that primary election.
So it wasn't caught immediately, like the system didn't flag it.
It appears not, at least not before counting. It seems to have been a procedural failure somehow that allowed 2 votes to register from just 1 individual.
That's concerning. What about the legal side? When did this come to light?
In terms of the legal action timeline, he was initially charged back in October 2024.
Okay, so a little while ago.
Yes, and there were 2 distinct counts initially. One was for voting both absentee and in person, the act itself.
Right.
And there was an additional count of offering to vote more than once, so slightly different legal points there.
I see. But he pled guilty to just 1.
Ultimately, yes. He reached a plea agreement and pled guilty to the single charge of voting absentee and in person, the act of the dual vote itself.
Okay. So he admitted it.
Yes. And it's particularly insightful, I think, to note that Prezzato himself, when he was articulating the facts for his plea, he acknowledged that he acted recklessly in casting those 2 votes.
Recklessly. That word seems important. What does that mean, legally speaking? Is that different from saying he deliberately tried to cheat?
It's very different, legally. Recklessly is quite significant. It doesn't necessarily imply, deliberate, premeditated intent to commit fraud.
Oh.
An intentional act to defraud the system would mean he set out specifically to break the rules and affect the outcome. Recklessness, on the other hand, often suggests more of a disregard for known rules or potential consequences.
Like maybe carelessness or confusion.
It could encompass that. Or a failure to exercise reasonable care without necessarily having that specific malicious intent to subvert the election.
So legally, that distinction matters a lot.
Oh, absolutely. From a legal standpoint, the difference between reckless behavior and deliberate intent can be profound. Proving deliberate intent, that mens rea or guilty mind, requires a much higher evidentiary bar.
Harder to prove.
Much harder. Prosecutors often need to demonstrate a clear plan or a specific state of mind to break the law, which can be notoriously difficult. Recklessness, though, might be proven simply by showing someone should have known better or acted without due caution, even if they didn't explicitly intend the illegal outcome. So, for prosecutors, getting a plea based on recklessness can sometimes be a strategic compromise.
How so?
Well, it allows them to secure an admission of wrongdoing, get a conviction on the record, without facing the much greater burden of proving that explicit, deliberate intent.
And for the defendant?
For the defendant, like Prezzato here, admitting recklessness often means potentially facing a less severe penalty or finding a path to avoid a permanent criminal record, which we'll see when we look at the specifics of his plea deal.
Okay.
So the key insight, I think, is that while the action itself, voting twice, clearly undermines election integrity,
No question.
the legal system often makes these practical distinctions based on the level of intent. And that can sometimes leave the public with, lingering questions about the true nature of the act, even if it allows for a legal resolution.
That distinction, whether it's deemed reckless or maybe intentional, it really is crucial, isn't it? Because this isn't just some dry legal technicality we're talking about.
Not at all.
It's a moment where a personal action, whatever the underlying intent might have been, directly impacts the perceived integrity of a profoundly important public process.
That public perception is key.
When we discuss election integrity, what we're really talking about is the public's confidence, right? The belief that every valid vote counts, and just as importantly, that no invalid vote gets counted.
Both sides of that coin are critical.
So consider the potential ripple effect that even a single dual vote, like Prezzato's, could have on public trust. If people perceive that the system can be compromised, even by someone acting, quote, recklessly, maybe out of confusion or just carelessness, it can seriously erode their faith in the overall fairness and accuracy of elections.
And in a democracy, that public trust is perhaps the most valuable and maybe the most fragile currency we have.
Absolutely. When that trust wavers, the legitimacy of the entire system starts to come into question.
It really does.
So with that in mind, how did the authorities respond to this specific case? What message were they trying to send?
Well, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel didn't mince words.
What did she say?
She made a very clear, very unequivocal statement regarding Prezzato's case. She was quoted saying, and this is direct, "Voting twice undermines our democratic process."
Straight to the point.
Very. These words are a powerful reinforcement of that foundational principle we were just talking about, the one that underpins all fair and free elections.
Did she say anything else? About enforcement?
Yes, she didn't just issue a statement of condemnation. She went further, emphasizing her office's unwavering commitment to actively prosecuting those who violate voting laws.
A promise to act.
Exactly. It signals this isn't just about punishing one individual's transgression. It's about sending a clear and decisive message to the entire electorate. The aim is clearly to ensure Michigan voters' confidence in the integrity of their elections. It's a pledge, really, to uphold the sanctity of the ballot box and protect those foundational processes from any compromise, perceived or actual.
Okay, so a strong statement from the AG. What about the actual legal outcome for Prezzato? You mentioned the plea deal.
Right. So delving into the legal handling here, the terms of Prezzato's plea agreement offer a pretty fascinating look at the balance the legal system tries to strike. between accountability and maybe rehabilitation.
What were the terms?
He was assigned a 6-month delayed probation sentence.
Delayed probation. What does that mean exactly?
It's significant. While he has admitted guilt by pleading, there's a clear pathway built into this sentence for the charges to potentially be dismissed entirely.
Dismissed, even after pleading guilty.
Yes, specifically, if he successfully meets all the terms and conditions laid out in this probation, things like staying out of trouble, maybe fines or community service, the usual conditions,
Okay.
then at the conclusion of that 6-month period, all charges will be dismissed with prejudice.
With prejudice. That sounds legally important, too.
It is. Dismissed with prejudice means those specific charges cannot be refiled against him in the future. It's a final dismissal on those grounds.
I see. So it's not just dropped for now. It's gone for good if he completes probation.
Exactly. And just for the record, he's scheduled to be formally sentenced by Judge Anthony Servito of the 16th Circuit Court in Macomb County on October 22nd, 2025. That's when the precise terms of that probation will likely be officially laid out.
Okay.
Now, the broader insight here, when you consider that dismissed with prejudice clause, it lies in understanding the complex message an outcome like this sends about the severity of an offense, like dual voting.
How so? What's the message?
Well, on one hand, the fact that charges were brought, a plea was entered, and a probationary period was assigned, that clearly demonstrates that election violations are taken seriously.
Right, there are consequences.
Exactly. It underscores that there are consequences for actions that undermine the electoral process.
Mm-hmm.
Law enforcement, the judicial system, they are paying attention.
What is it?
But the potential for all charges to be completely wiped away if probation terms are met, that could be interpreted in various ways by the public.
Like what?
Some might see it as a measured, pragmatic legal response, maybe acknowledging the individual's admission of recklessness rather than proven deliberate intent. And it offers a pathway for someone, especially a 68-year-old, to move forward without a permanent felony record, perhaps.
So a focus on rehabilitation, maybe a second chance.
That's one view. It aligns with a system that can prioritize that. Others, however, might perceive this outcome as far too lenient.
Arguing it's not tough enough?
Arguing that any act undermining election integrity, regardless of the precise legal finding on intent, should carry more significant, more indelible penalties, to act as a stronger deterrent for future incidents.
So public perception could really split on this.
Absolutely. The public's perception of this outcome often hinges heavily on their existing views about how prevalent or impactful voter fraud is and how robust they believe our election systems are in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's a really delicate balance, illustrating that tension between strict legal definitions, prosecutorial discretion in pursuing cases, and the public's expectations of justice and deterrence.
That makes sense. This Michigan case, the Prasado case, it certainly gives us a tangible example of voter fraud. Something concrete.
Yes, it does.
But it's really vital for us, and for you listening, to understand that this isn't necessarily an isolated incident. Our sources point to other allegations and some proven charges around election integrity.
Right, both within Michigan and even further afield.
Suggesting maybe a broader pattern of scrutiny, or at least concern, about the security of our elections.
Let's look at those.
Okay, so beyond Prasado's actions, our sources highlight another significant incident right there in Michigan. And this one really compels us to think about broader implications for who gets to vote.
What was that?
It involved a man named Haxiang Gao. He was identified specifically in the source as a citizen and national of the People's Republic of China.
Okay, so a non-U.S. citizen?
Exactly. And he was found to have illegally cast a ballot in the 2024 presidential election.
Wow, in a presidential election?
Yes. So this moves beyond maybe a procedural error or a dual vote by an eligible voter. This is about an individual who, by definition, by law, is not eligible to vote in the U.S. election.
Right.
Nonetheless, casting a ballot. And in one of the most consequential elections we have.
That definitely raises fundamental questions about voter registration protocols, doesn't it? And verification processes. How did that happen?
The source doesn't detail how it happened, just that it did and he was charged.
Well, the implications of a non-citizen voting, especially in a presidential election, are quite profound. They touch on several layers of national concern.
Like what?
Firstly, it undeniably challenges the principle of national sovereignty. The right to choose leaders in a democratic nation is, well, strictly reserved for its citizens.
That seems basic.
It is.
Yeah.
And when that barrier is breached, it potentially dilutes the exclusive voice of the electorate. Now, look, a single non-citizen vote might not realistically sway a national election outcome.
Probably not, statistically.
But the principle itself is deeply unsettling. It introduces a potential vector for foreign influence, even if it's indirect or unintentional in that specific instance.
Okay, sovereignty. What else?
Secondly, it directly impacts the perceived integrity of the electorate itself. Our whole system is founded on the idea that only eligible citizens determine the course of the nation.
Right.
When that eligibility criterion is circumvented, it can erode public confidence. Confidence in the purity of voter rolls, confidence in the overall legitimacy of election results. People start to wonder who else is on these rolls.
That makes sense. And the source mentioned other Michigan incidents, too.
Yes, and connecting this to local governance, the article also notes that just a year prior, back in 2023,
Okay.
2 Michigan city councilmen were charged with election and absentee ballot fraud.
City councilmen, elected officials.
Exactly. So this highlights that alleged irregularities aren't just confined to, say, individual citizens maybe making mistakes or acting recklessly. They can potentially reach into the very heart of local government.
That feels different.
It does. When elected officials themselves, people sworn to uphold the law and serve the public, are implicated in election fraud. That creates a unique kind of challenge.
How so?
Well, such incidents can significantly erode public trust, not just in elections, but in local government itself, which is often the most direct and tangible form of governance for citizens.
Right, the government you interact with most.
Precisely. It suggests a potential vulnerability within the system that isn't limited by one's status or position. It adds layers of complexity to this whole narrative of election security. It's not just about outsiders or mistakes, it can involve insiders too.
Okay, so Michigan has seen a few different types of cases, but you said the issue goes beyond Michigan, even beyond the U.S.
That's right. It's not just Michigan grappling with these issues. Our source briefly broadens our perspective to another country.
Well, which one?
Canada. It serves as a powerful reminder, really, that challenges to election integrity are far from confined just to our borders.
What happened in Canada?
The article mentions that just last week, a Canadian man was indicted for voter fraud.
Okay.
And what makes this particularly noteworthy, according to the source, is that it wasn't just in one election. It was allegedly in both the 2022 and 2024 federal elections in Canada.
2 federal elections. Wow. Does the source give more details on that one, like a name or location?
No, unfortunately, the source provides much less specific detail on this Canadian case. We don't get a name, we don't get a precise location within Canada, or the ultimate legal outcome yet. It's mentioned more briefly.
So why is it important then?
Well, the mere mention of it, I think, tells us something important about the global nature of these concerns.
That it's not just a U.S. problem.
Exactly. The inclusion of this Canadian indictment is quite insightful, even with limited details, because it immediately signals that issues around election integrity aren't unique to the United States.
Right.
Many developed democracies face similar challenges in maintaining fair, transparent, and secure elections, especially as voting methods evolve with technology and, changing societal needs.
Do Canada and the U.S. have similar systems?
They have distinct electoral systems, definitely. The U.S., with its presidential system, complex federal and state interactions. Canada has a parliamentary system. But the fundamental goal of preventing illegal voting, ensuring one person gets one vote, that remains the same.
So are the vulnerabilities the same?
That's the interesting question it raises. Are there common vulnerabilities across different democracies? Things like maintaining accurate voter rolls, preventing impersonation, ensuring secure absentee or mail-in processes, guarding against foreign interference.
Maybe.
Or are these incidents more reflective of distinct national contexts, each wrestling with its own unique set of electoral laws and specific challenges? We can't say definitively from this brief mention.
Okay.
But what this Canadian case underscores is that the mechanisms to prevent and prosecute fraud are active in other democracies too. It reinforces that vigilance in protecting the ballot box is really a global endeavor, not just an American one.
These individual cases then, both local, like in Michigan, and international, like the Canadian example, they serve as more than just isolated stories, don't they?
Yeah. Absolutely. They act as sparks, really. Sparks in a much larger ongoing national debate right here about the very mechanisms and methods we use to conduct our elections.
And especially, it seems, concerning mail-in ballots. That seems to be a major focus.
That has become a significant flashpoint in recent years, yes.
So how does this fit into the national political discussion? What were leaders saying?
Well, our sources reveal a very clear, very proactive stance from Donald Trump on election integrity, particularly concerning voter identification requirements.
What stance is that?
Back in March, he signed an executive order, and that order mandated that voters show proof of citizenship.
Proof of citizenship.
Yeah.
Not just ID, but specific proof you're a citizen.
Correct. That was the requirement in the executive order. It was a significant policy move designed with the explicit aim of tightening the requirements for voting eligibility.
And the goal?
To directly address concerns about non-citizens potentially participating in U.S. elections, like the Gao case we just discussed, though on a potentially larger scale.
So the idea was that current systems aren't adequate.
The impetus behind such a requirement stems from a belief held by proponents that current systems might not sufficiently verify citizenship status, thereby leaving a potential loophole for ineligible voters to cast ballots and, in their view, dilute the votes of actual citizens.
Okay, so an executive order for proof of citizenship. What happened with that?
Well, that executive order swiftly ran into significant legal challenges.
The courts got involved.
They did. In June, a federal judge struck down part of that executive order.
Struck it down. Why?
It really highlights the immense constitutional complexities, the legal hurdles that are almost always inherent in major election reforms, especially those that directly impact voting rights and access.
What kind of legal principles are at play there?
The court's decision likely hinged on long-standing legal principles that establish voting as a fundamental right. Any measure that restricts this right, like requiring specific proof of citizenship, typically has to pass what's called strict scrutiny in the courts.
Strict scrutiny. What's that?
It means the government has to demonstrate two things. First, that the measure serves a truly compelling state interest, a very important reason. And second, that the measure is narrowly tailored, meaning it's the least restrictive way possible to achieve that interest.
And the judge presumably found it didn't meet that test?
Presumably. Opponents of these kinds of requirements frequently argue that they can create an undue burden on eligible citizens.
How so?
They argue it could potentially disenfranchise people who might struggle to obtain or present the necessary documents, think birth certificates, passports. This could disproportionately affect certain groups, maybe marginalized communities, the elderly, people in rural areas without easy access to government offices to get these documents.
So it's a clash between security concerns and access concerns.
Exactly. That's the deep tension. The perceived need for enhanced security measures versus the constitutional imperative to protect and ensure broad voter access. Courts often end up being the arbiters, weighing these competing interests. And frequently, they find that measures seen as overly restrictive violate established precedents designed to prevent voter disenfranchisement.
Okay, so part of that executive order was struck down. What happened next in terms of Trump's stance?
Well, following that legal setback, on August 18th, Donald Trump announced an even more ambitious initiative.
More ambitious.
He stated he would lead a movement to completely eliminate mail-in ballots, voting machines, and other current election practices altogether.
Eliminate them entirely. That's a huge change.
It is. And his rhetoric on this point was incredibly strong, very direct. He posted, and I'm quoting the source directly here, "We are now the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. All others gave it up because of the massive voter fraud encountered."
Wow. That's a big claim, the only country.
Yeah.
And massive fraud elsewhere.
It's a powerful claim, yes. It frames the U.S. as a stark outlier, using a system he asserts is inherently prone to widespread fraud.
Did he mention any specific actions?
Yes, he indicated plans for immediate executive action again, stating, quote, "We will begin this effort by signing an executive order to help bring honesty to the 2026 midterm elections."
An executive order to ban mail-in voting and machines for the midterms.
That appears to be the stated goal, yes, to use executive power to initiate this change.
Did he anticipate opposition?
He certainly did, and he didn't shy away from stating who he expected it from. He explicitly accused, again quoting, "This effort will be strongly opposed by the Democrats because they cheat at levels never seen before."
Okay, so very strong language, direct accusation.
Unquestionably. The language is designed to be impactful, to express a profound distrust in current election methods, and to directly challenge political opponents on this issue.
So let's unpack that rhetoric a bit. The consistent framing of mail-in ballots as a hoax, that strong assertion that elections can never be honest with mail-in ballots voting. What's the underlying message there?
Well, that consistent, forceful framing reveals a really significant underlying narrative. It goes far beyond just simple criticism of a method.
How so?
It suggests a fundamental, deep-seated distrust in the very mechanisms for widespread voting as they currently exist in many places. The message being conveyed is that the system itself is inherently flawed, that it's intrinsically susceptible to manipulation and ultimately incapable of yielding an honest outcome under these current practices.
So not just needs fixing, but is fundamentally broken.
That's the implication of that language, yes. It sets a very clear, very aggressive agenda for reform, advocating for a complete overhaul, really, rather than just incremental adjustments or tweaks to security.
And what's the potential impact of that kind of rhetoric?
Well, the critical insight here is how such powerful and consistent rhetoric influences public perception of election outcomes, and crucially, perception of the legitimacy of the entire process.
I would see that.
When a significant political figure, someone with a large following, repeatedly labels a common voting method as inherently dishonest or a hoax, it can sow profound seeds of doubt among a large segment of the population.
Even if others disagree or present counter-evidence.
Yes, because this isn't just about disagreement on policy preferences, like whether mail-in voting is convenient or not. It can lead to a pervasive sense of skepticism about the results themselves, potentially decreasing confidence in those results even when they're officially certified, audited, and confirmed by authorities. It fosters an environment where distrust, rather than trust, can become the default position for many voters, and that can impact their engagement, their belief in democratic institutions, everything.
So this firm position against mail-in ballots, it isn't just an isolated thought, is it? You're saying it's part of a bigger critique.
Exactly. It's part of a broader, encompassing critique of how elections have evolved, especially in recent years. And it extends beyond just the method of casting the ballot.
To what else?
To other fundamental aspects of our electoral infrastructure.
Okay, let's break down the core argument against mail-in ballots, specifically, as presented in the source. It centers on that claim of massive voter fraud encountered globally, right?
Yes, that's the central assertion. The claim is that the supposed massive fraud has led other countries to abandon mail-in voting.
And the strategy there is to position the U.S. as an outlier.
It seems so. It strategically positions the U.S. as clinging to a practice that, according to this narrative, has been rejected elsewhere due to its inherent vulnerabilities. The implication is clear. If other nations saw the pitfalls and moved away, the U.S. should follow suit immediately to protect its own elections.
So it frames mail-in ballots not as a convenience or access issue,
but as a direct and existential threat to the honesty and reliability of elections. That's the core of that argument.
And you said the critique extends beyond mail-in ballots.
Yes, it extends forcefully to voting machines as well.
What's the criticism there? The source called him
a complete and total disaster. That's the quote.
Again, very strong language. What's the concern behind that?
This perspective highlights deep-seated concerns about the reliability, the security, and the potential for manipulation believed to be inherent within the technology used to cast and count votes.
So it's not just how ballots get to voters, but how they're processed.
Exactly. The argument isn't merely about ballot delivery, but fundamentally about how those votes are recorded, processed, and tallied by machines.
What are the specific worries people raise about machines?
Well, the critical insight lies in understanding those specific concerns. They often revolve around several key areas. For example, potential software vulnerabilities could hackers exploit flaws.
Okay.
The possibility of physical tampering with the machines themselves, a perceived lack of transparency in the tabulation process. Is it a black box where votes go in and totals come out without clear visibility? Or maybe the inability to effectively audit the results afterwards to ensure complete accuracy. Can you really verify the machine count?
What do proponents of the machine say?
Well, proponents, including election officials and cybersecurity experts, argue vigorously for their robust security features. They point to things like multiple layers of encryption, physical security like tamper-evident seals, rigorous pre-election testing, and mandatory post-election audits, which often involve hand-recounting paper ballots from a sample of machines to verify the electronic count.
So there are arguments on both sides about the technology.
Absolutely. But the persistent, strong criticism highlights a significant distrust in the technological backbone of modern elections for a segment of the population, and a strong demand for systems that are not only secure, but are perceived by everyone as unequivocally secure and verifiable.
That perception piece seems key again.
It really is. That tension between the demonstrated security measures claimed by officials and the public perception of vulnerability is a crucial element of this whole national debate.
And ultimately, the argument seems to tie all this together into something bigger.
Yes, ultimately, the argument supporting these proposed drastic changes, eliminating mail-in, eliminating machines, it boils down to a foundational belief, a stark, potent warning about the very essence of national identity and governance.
What's the quote there?
It's explicitly laid out in the source, quote, "Without fair and honest elections and strong and powerful borders, you don't have even a semblance of a country."
Wow. Linking election integrity directly to borders and national existence.
Exactly. It powerfully connects election integrity, not just to, say, the efficient functioning of a democracy, but to the broader concept of national sovereignty and national cohesion.
So the stakes are framed as incredibly high.
Extremely high. It posits that a country's continued existence, its stability, its very identity, are fundamentally dependent upon those two pillars: secure borders and uncorrupted elections. The implication is profound. Any compromise or perceived weakness on either front threatens the very fabric of the nation.
So it elevates the discussion for administrative details.
To truly existential concerns for the state itself. That's the level of gravity being attached to these election practices in this argument.
Now, it's important, isn't it, to contrast these strong criticisms with what actually happened with voting methods recently?
Yes, absolutely. It's crucial to juxtapose these strong, unequivocal criticisms with the actual trends on the ground regarding how many states conducted elections, especially in the last few years.
And the article mentions.
Our article explicitly mentions that many states pivoted mail-in voting since 2020.
Pivoted since 2020. That timing seems significant.
It's a key piece of contextual information. It implicitly refers, of course, to the profound impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on election procedures.
Right, the pandemic changed everything for a while.
It did. In response to widespread public health concerns about people congregating in polling places, numerous states across the political spectrum, it's important to note rapidly expanded or adopted widespread mail-in voting options.
Why did they do that? What was the justification then?
The primary initial justifications were really twofold. First, obviously, to protect public health by minimizing physical contact during a pandemic.
Makes sense.
And second, to ensure continued accessibility for voters during that unprecedented global crisis. The goal was to maintain high voter participation even under difficult circumstances.
So it was seen as necessary at the time.
It was often seen by officials in many states as a necessary and pragmatic solution to a unique and dangerous challenge. So the key insight here is that while the current criticisms are very strong, the recent historical context reveals that the expansion of mail-in voting was largely a response, often bipartisan at the state level, to an emergent public health emergency.
Driven by wanting people to still be able to vote safely.
Exactly. Driven by a desire to facilitate voting access under incredibly difficult circumstances. Understanding those initial motivations is really crucial for fully evaluating the current debate, because the criticisms now often clash directly with those original justifications for the expansion.
So that pivot, since 2020, as the article calls it, it implied a really significant and rapid shift, didn't it, in how millions of Americans cast their ballots?
A massive shift, yes. Moving away from primarily in-person voting traditions in many places to a much broader embrace of absentee and mail-in options.
And you're saying this created tension.
Well, that rapid expansion immediately created a dynamic tension. On one side, you definitely had expanded access for voters. It made it easier, maybe safer for many people to participate.
Okay, increased access.
But on the other side, almost simultaneously, it raised very real concerns about security, concerns about ballot handling, verification, potential for fraud, all the things that have now become central to the national debate we're discussing.
So it forced a difficult question.
It really forces us to grapple with a critical question. How do we, as a society, effectively balance that imperative of broad accessibility for all eligible voters with ensuring robust, maybe even foolproof security measures in our election processes?
Can you maximize both at the same time?
That's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? Is it truly possible to maximize both simultaneously? Or do efforts to enhance one, like making access easier, necessarily create perceived or maybe even actual compromises for the other, security?
It feels like a trade-off sometimes.
That fundamental tension, that search for the elusive perfect balance, lies right at the very heart of the current discussions and all the proposed reforms surrounding election administration today.
Okay, so we've taken quite a journey here. We started with that single concrete case of alleged dual voting in Michigan, with Frank Persado.
Right, the specific example.
We move through other instances of reported irregularities, both locally there and even internationally in Canada.
Broadening the scope.
And then we delve deep into this vigorous national debate about the very methods and mechanics of our elections, covering everything from mail-in ballots to voting machines.
And the cost for reform.
Exactly. Now, let's try to bring it back home. Back to you, the listener. Let's connect these dots and think about what all of this means for your understanding of our democratic process.
How does it affect the individual?
Right. Let's start with that Persado case again. It serves as a concrete, very personal reminder of individual responsibility within the voting process, doesn't it?
It does. Your actions matter.
Whether his actions were truly reckless, maybe due to confusion, or whether they leaned more towards an intentional disregard for the rules,
Yeah.
the outcome was the same in one sense. An individual's action was scrutinized, it was found to be a violation, and it carried specific legal consequences.
Right. It wasn't ignored.
This isn't some abstract theory of fraud. It's a real person facing real charges for their conduct in an election. So for you, listening, understanding this incident maybe underscores your own civic duty and the vigilance required of every single voter.
What does that mean, vigilance?
It highlights that the act of voting isn't merely a right we possess. It also comes with significant responsibilities. And the system is designed, however imperfectly maybe, to identify and address individual infractions when they're discovered.
So pay attention to the rules.
Yeah. It asks us all to be mindful of the rules, to understand the gravity of our participation, and to ensure our own actions consistently uphold the integrity of the process, rather than inadvertently, or God forbid, purposefully undermining it.
That's the individual side. But expanding on that, while individual cases like Prasado's are important for specific accountability, the broader discussions we've been having around mail-in ballots and voting machines, they point to much larger systemic concerns about the election infrastructure itself and the processes.
So it's not just about one person's actions.
Right. This isn't simply about one person making a mistake or even committing fraud. It's about the very mechanisms that are designed to ensure fair outcomes for literally millions and millions of voters.
What are the systemic concerns again?
Well, critics of the current systems, as we've heard, often highlight perceived vulnerabilities. With widespread mail-in voting, they might worry about things like potential ballot harvesting or the challenges of verifying millions of signatures accurately and consistently, or just the sheer volume making it hard, they argue, to track every single ballot with absolute certainty.
And for machines?
For voting machines, concerns frequently revolve around the security of proprietary software, the possibility of electronic tampering, or the perceived lack of transparency, that black box idea in the tabulation process. Is it auditable? Is it clear how the count happened?
But there are counter-arguments for the robustness of these systems.
Oh, absolutely. Proponents of these systems, election officials, cybersecurity experts, voting rights groups, they rigorously argue for their robustness.
What points do they make?
They point to multiple layers of security. Things like strict chain of custody protocols for ballots, sophisticated signature verification techniques that often involve multiple checks, mandatory post-election audits that frequently include hand recounts of paper trails to verify machine counts.
Okay.
And they also emphasize the significant benefits of expanded access that these methods, particularly mail-in voting, provide, making it easier for a much wider range of citizens, including the elderly, disabled, or those with difficult work schedules, to participate.
So it requires looking at both sides.
Exactly. The core insight here is that understanding election integrity requires looking beyond just individual acts. You have to consider the systemic challenges and appreciate both the perceived vulnerabilities that critics are highlighting and the robust, multi-layered defenses that election officials assert are firmly in place. It's complex.
And these discussions, they aren't just abstract academic debates, are they? They have real-world consequences.
Absolutely not abstract. They directly shape the policies and the laws that govern our elections.
How does that affect the listener? You?
Well, in turn, those policies profoundly affect how accessible, how secure, and ultimately how trustworthy you perceive the entire voting process to be.
Could you give an example?
Sure. Think about how different voting methods might personally impact your own ability or even your willingness to cast a ballot.
Okay.
If you live, say, in a remote rural area with limited transportation, maybe mail-in voting is an incredibly convenient option. It might be the difference between voting easily and struggling to get to a poll.
Right. Increased participation.
But conversely, if you're someone who is deeply concerned about security, maybe you've read about potential vulnerabilities.
Well, the idea of an in-person vote, maybe on a paper ballot that's hand-counted, might instill a far greater sense of confidence in the outcome for you.
So personal circumstances and beliefs really shape how you view these methods.
Exactly. The ongoing conversation about these various methods isn't just for politicians or policy wonks. It directly impacts the very experience you have as a voter. And ultimately, it impacts your faith in the results of our elections.
And that faith matters. That trust, or the lack thereof, it directly influences the perceived legitimacy of our democratic institutions and, frankly, the future of our representative government. It's foundational.
So in navigating all these discussions, these different viewpoints, what's required from us?
Well, the necessity of critical thinking really comes to the forefront here, especially when you're presented with such varied and often very emotionally charged viewpoints.
It's easy to get caught up in the emotion.
Very easy. On one side, you have these potent allegations of massive voter fraud. On the other, you have official statements emphasizing the critical importance of not undermining our democratic process. It's a landscape filled with strong opinions and really significant implications.
So how do you navigate that?
The critical insight, I think, is how to effectively sift through all this information. The claims, the counterclaims, the official statements, the passionate rhetoric. How do you sort through it all to form your own informed opinion about the true state of election integrity?
It sounds like work.
It requires an active and deliberate effort, absolutely. Looking beyond just the sensational headlines, delving into the specific details of cases, like we did with Prezzato, examining the evidence, or sometimes a lack thereof, presented for each assertion.
And considering the source.
And considering the broader context and the potential motivations or perspectives behind different viewpoints, it's really about being an active consumer of information, not just a passive recipient absorbing whatever comes your way.
Which leads perfectly to the point about source awareness.
Yeah, precisely. That's exactly why it's so important to be acutely aware of the context from which information originates. Where is this coming from?
Our source for this deep dive, for example.
Our primary source today, as we noted, is from townhall.com, and the site explicitly identifies itself as providing conservative reporting that takes on the radical left and woke media.
So knowing that, what do we do with the information? Does it mean we dismiss it?
No, not at all. Understanding that our source is coming from a self-proclaimed conservative perspective doesn't mean you automatically dismiss the information presented. That wouldn't be critical thinking either.
What does it mean then?
Rather, it means you factor that editorial stance into your critical assessment of the information.
How?
It helps you understand the lens through which certain issues might be framed. It helps you notice the terminology that might be used or anticipate which aspects of a story might be emphasized and maybe which might be de-emphasized or omitted entirely.
So it's about context.
It's all about context.
Right.
This kind of source awareness encourages you, the listener, to actively seek out multiple perspectives. Go read sources with different viewpoints on the same events.
To get a fuller picture.
Exactly. Ensuring you build a more balanced and comprehensive understanding of complex issues like election integrity, rather than relying solely on a single viewpoint, however thoroughly presented it might seem. This approach empowers you to form a more robust, more nuanced understanding for yourself.
Okay, so we've taken a really comprehensive journey today, haven't we?
We've covered a lot of ground.
Started with that single tangible case of alleged double voting in Michigan.
The Prezzato case.
Explored other instances of reported fraud, locally and internationally.
Broadening the context.
And then really got into the heart of this vigorous national debate about the very mechanics of our elections. Mail-in ballots, voting machines, the calls for fundamental reform.
The big picture debates.
It's abundantly clear, I think, that election integrity is a topic that resonates deeply across the political spectrum. It touches upon the core principles of our democracy and that fundamental trust we place, or perhaps struggle to place, in our institutions.
Indeed. And I think the critical insight to carry forward from all this is that the integrity of our elections isn't some static concept set in stone.
It changes.
It's a dynamic, continuously evolving conversation. It's constantly being refined and reshaped. By technological advancements, for sure, by policy decisions made at state and federal levels, and maybe most crucially, by public trust and public perception.
So it's always under review.
Exactly. The incidents we've discussed today, from individual acts of fraud like Prezzato's to those broader policy debates and the powerful voices advocating for significant change, they all serve as stark reminders that the system is always under scrutiny, always being evaluated, always in a process of being refined or debated.
Even if the debates are heated.
Especially when they are. That ongoing vigilance, that constant questioning and striving for improvement, even when the debates are contentious and challenging. That's arguably a hallmark of a healthy, engaged democracy. It means people care deeply about the process.
That's a good way to look at it. So as you, our listener, reflect on this deep dive and consider all these multifaceted layers of election integrity we've explored, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. In an era where our election processes are under such intense scrutiny and often fierce debate, what single change, if any, do you personally believe would most significantly bolster public confidence in the fairness and accuracy of future elections, while also ensuring broad and equitable participation for all eligible voters?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Balancing confidence and access. A tough question to end on.
You Democrats! Bloated bureaucrats! Like a New York sewer rat! Go away!